Remember, I am sending you out like sheep among wolves, so be cunning as serpents, and yet harmless as doves. Yesterday, in Wales and in our parish, Carnarvon in the north, we were feasting one of the 40 martyrs, one of the 6 of Wales itself, a local man, Father John Jones from Llanodfawr down the road, who was a Franciscan and was formed in the priesthood on the continent, came back and did not really have much time to function before he was tracked down. He was hanged, drawn and quartered. That's the awful punishment for traitors of the king. Not in Tyburn itself, but in another spot, but the cruelty was the same. And it was just another, of which our local martyr, Oliver Plunkett, is the last, in the long line of those who tried to live this gospel as best they could. The Jesuits were very good at it. They had a whole system of underground ministry. They knew the risk, and they meant business. They knew that if there were no priests, there were no sacraments, no proclamation of the truth, and that therefore old Nick would have what he wanted, the crown jewels, England and all that went with it, and eventually Ireland. Therefore, no sacraments. So, these people took it seriously. They had a whole system of alibis. Do you know what an alibi is? Well, they would try to hide themselves under false names and all kinds of things and have a story prepared, just justifying things with regard to their conscience insofar as they knew that they had to be there as invisible priests. However, they knew that if they were caught, it was going to be atrocious, because they had all the secrets in their head. And one time, there was one particular disaster of a catch. It's when the Jesuit lay brother, who was responsible for all the hidey holes, and were very, very, very well done. They would have holes in unexpected corners that they couldn't find, and in them they would hide the priest. Well, he, with another one, another lay brother, when the persecutors came to the mansion, they themselves and the priests hid themselves, and the priests had the more large hidey hole, and the brothers, including the one who made them, had a tiny one. So they were in there, the lay brothers, in a tiny, tiny space, 2 of them together, for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, with 1 apple to eat between them. In the end, they were dying, and they had a brainwave. But they would give themselves up as the priests, because it's the priests they wanted. They did. But unfortunately, one of the betrayers, because that's how it used to work, people would be in the crowd of secret worshippers, Catholics, but one of them would be a betrayer and would go to the authorities to say where the priest was. So this particular one knew what the big Jesuit they were looking for looked like, so it didn't work. And they discovered, however, that they had caught somebody, and then when it came to interrogation, they discovered the prize they had. One of the 2 lay brothers caught was the one who made the hidey holes. So he was a key object of persecution, and they wanted all they possibly could. Information, information, information. So he was one of the most atrociously tortured. So much so that he died under torture. And of course they gave this version officially, which of course we know what the truth was. But under duress he committed suicide. Suicide, my foot. He died under torture and they were too embarrassed to admit it. And so the facts remained in his head, as with the others who never ever opened their mouth. And we know what the torture was like, the different tortures. Why? Because one of them survived. It's a certain Jesuit Father Gerard. What happened was, he was caught and he was put in the tower. And he was tortured, and he goes through all the details of how atrocious it was. But then things happened. His desire to celebrate one more time what we're doing here now freely was so great that with writing secret ink, have you done that? If you write with orange juice, and if the other person puts the orange juice script in front of a candle, the script comes up. Trick for you. So they were doing that to get all the bits that they had to have, because in those days they had to have lots more than we have now to be able to celebrate. An altar stone, that kind of thing. You couldn't just improvise in those days. They were tiny, but they had to have all the bits. So he got them. And also, even though he was tortured and mangled in his limbs, he managed, with sheets and whatnot, to escape. So he got to the continent, to the other Jesuits, and he wasn't sent back. And he wrote his diary, and it's fascinating what used to happen in the underground. There's another one. He found himself in the same Tower of London, and what was his joy when he saw before him what had obviously been the alcove of the great martyr who had been there before him, and in it was made into a little angle of prayer, and he could see if he did the same, he'd have the same grace. And so he plugged in to the grace that had gone before him, still in the air. And of course he too had the same end. Amongst the first, early in time, 1535, were none other than the Lord Chancellor of England, who had done everything for the king. Do you know his name? Thomas More. He was the second after the king, and he too was given a privilege of only being beheaded, not hanged, drawn and quartered, because he was a friend of the king. And so he had a gentle end. However, John Fisher, the bishop, also was martyred. Initially, they weren't happy about what was happening with regard to Henry wanting the wrong person to be the successor, but then it went on to other things. So I spare you all these details, but I do mention them. Why? Nowadays, it's all brushed under the carpet. A few years ago, they went as far as to have a concelebration between Reverend Graham, the Anglican clergyman of Drogheda, and the Augustinians in the Augustinian church one Easter. Of course, he was wrapped on knuckles by Rome. The Augustinian in question. But it shows how indifferentism has come in. It's easy to say, oh, it's all about love. It's true, it's all about love. But the truth is actually more than just about love. Truth is truth. And either we have the presence or we don't. Either we have the priesthood or we don't. It doesn't matter how high the mitre is on a person of a man, e.g. an archbishop who's an Anglican. If he's not a priest, he's not a priest. It doesn't make any difference what he's wearing. The same applies to a woman. So these people had very little when it came to trimmings, but they had the essence. I conclude, they were cunning as serpents, innocent as doves. Why? They stayed in a state of grace, that grace which comes to sacramental confession. They died for the sacraments, lest we not have them in our time. Be careful, we might forget the cost of what we receive so easily and brush the real issue under the carpet in some false ecumenical